You just sold a gun to your friend. You've known him for 20 years. He's a good guy. He passed a background check. Everything seemed fine, except you just committed a federal felony that carries 5 years in prison and a $250,000 fine, and you had no idea. Because the ATF just changed the rules on what counts as being a firearms dealer. And now selling even one gun to a buddy can land you in federal prison if the ATF decides you had the wrong intent. This isn't a joke. This isn't fear-mongering. This is ATF Rule 2022R17F, and it's active right now. Quick question before we continue. Are you subscribed yet? Because what I'm about to reveal could save you from federal prosecution. 90% of gun owners have no idea this rule even exists, and they're about to find out the hard way when ATF agents show up at their door. Hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss critical information like this. Here's what just happened that you need to know about. The ATF finalized a new rule that redefines what it means to be engaged in the business of dealing firearms. For decades, the standard was simple. If you were buying and selling guns as your livelihood, you needed a federal firearms license. If you were just a collector or an enthusiast who occasionally sold a gun from your personal collection, you didn't. That made sense. Everyone understood it. But now the ATF has changed the standard, and the new rule is so vague, so broad, and so dangerous that almost any private sale could be twisted into unlicensed dealing. Let me break down what this rule actually says, because the details are where people are getting destroyed. The old rule said you had to be engaged in the business, which meant you were buying and selling guns with the principal objective of livelihood and profit. The key phrase was livelihood. You had to be making a living from it. But ATF Rule 2022R17F eliminates the livelihood requirement. Now the standard is whether you are engaged in the business to predominantly earn a profit. Not livelihood, just profit. And here's where it gets insane. The ATF says that profit doesn't mean you're making a living. It just means you intended to make money. So if you buy a gun for $500 and you sell it a month later for $600, you made a profit. And under the new rule, the ATF can argue that you were engaged in the business of dealing firearms without a license. That's a federal felony. Now here's what most people are missing about this rule. The ATF doesn't have to prove you were actually running a gun business. They don't have to show that you sold 50 guns or 100 guns. They can charge you based on selling just 1 or 2 guns if they can argue you had the intent to make a profit. And the ATF has created a list of factors they use to determine intent. These factors are so broad that they can apply to almost anyone. Let me walk you through the factors because this is critical. Factor 1, you purchased a firearm and resold it shortly afterward. The ATF doesn't define shortly, but they've indicated that 30 days or less is suspicious. So if you buy a gun and change your mind a few weeks later and sell it, the ATF might say you were dealing. Factor 2, you sold the firearm in its original packaging or in like-new condition. If you bought a gun, never used it, and sold it still in the box, the ATF sees that as evidence you bought it to resell, not for personal use. Factor 3, you advertised the firearm for sale online or at a gun show. If you posted on Arms List or Gunbroker or a local forum saying, hey, I'm selling this gun, the ATF can use that as evidence you were engaged in the business. Factor 4, you accepted payment through methods that suggest a commercial transaction, like PayPal or Venmo or credit cards. If your buddy paid you with a Cash App instead of cash, the ATF might say that looks like a business transaction. Factor 5, you kept records of your sales. If you wrote down what you sold, when you sold it, and for how much, the ATF can argue you were keeping business records, which means you were acting as a dealer. And Factor 6, you bought multiple firearms in a short period with the intent to resell them. If you bought 3 guns at a gun show and sold 2 of them within a few months, the ATF might say you were straw purchasing or dealing. Now let me give you a real-world example of how this is playing out right now. Imagine a guy named Jason. Jason is a gun enthusiast. He's been collecting for years. He buys and sells occasionally from his personal collection. Last year, Jason bought a Glock 19 at a gun show for $450. He took it to the range once, decided he didn't like it. 2 weeks later, he sold it to a coworker for $500. Jason made $50. He wasn't trying to run a business. He just wanted to recoup most of his money on a gun he didn't want. But here's what the ATF sees. Jason bought a gun and resold it within 30 days. He made a profit. He transferred it to someone he knew, which could indicate a pattern of dealing. If the ATF decides to investigate Jason, they can charge him with dealing in firearms without a license. And if convicted, Jason is looking at 5 years in federal prison and a $250,000 fine. All because he sold 1 gun to a coworker. Now here's what makes this rule so terrifying. The ATF doesn't have to prove you actually made a profit. They just have to prove you intended to make a profit. And intent is subjective. How do you prove what you were thinking when you bought a gun? You can't. So the ATF uses circumstantial evidence. They look at the factors I just mentioned. And if enough of those factors are present, they assume you had intent to profit. That's guilty until proven innocent, And it's happening right now. The ATF has already started investigations under this new rule. They're targeting people who post guns for sale online. They're monitoring gun shows. They're looking at FFL transfer records to see who's buying and selling frequently. And when they find someone who fits their profile, they open a case. If you're finding this helpful so far, imagine what you'll learn in my next video where I break down the exact words to use if ATF agents show up at your door asking about gun sales. One wrong sentence can waive your rights and give them everything they need to prosecute you. Subscribe right now so you don't miss it. That video drops next week. Now let's talk about the private sale exemption, because this is where people think they're safe. A lot of gun owners believe that as long as they are selling from their personal collection and they are not a dealer, they can sell to anyone without a license. That used to be mostly true. But under the new rule, the ATF is saying that even personal collection sales can be dealing if you have the wrong intent. The rule doesn't provide a safe harbor. It doesn't say, as long as you sell fewer than X guns per year, you're fine. Instead, it says every sale is evaluated based on the totality of the circumstances. That means the ATF can pick and choose who to go after based on their interpretation of your intent. And here's the worst part. The rule applies retroactively in the sense that the ATF can look at your past sales and use them as evidence. If you sold 5 guns over the last 2 years and the ATF decides that shows a pattern of dealing, they can charge you now under the new rule, even though those sales happened before the rule was finalized. Because the underlying law, 18 U.S.C. section 922 AA 1A, has always made it illegal to deal without a license. The new rule just changes how the ATF interprets what dealing means. So your old sales can come back to haunt you. Now, quick legal note, this is educational information, not legal advice. If you're facing an ATF investigation, or if you have questions about whether your sales might be considered dealing, you need to consult with a federal criminal defense attorney who specializes in firearms law. Do not try to handle this yourself. Get a lawyer immediately. Let me walk you through what you need to do right now to protect yourself. Step 1. Stop selling guns from your personal collection unless you absolutely have to. I know that sounds extreme, but the risk is too high. If you have a gun you don't want, consider trading it in at a gun shop instead of selling it privately. You'll get less money, but you won't risk federal prison. Step 2. If you do sell a gun privately, document everything. Write down why you're selling it. Personal use, didn't like it, need the money, whatever. Keep a record that shows this was not a business transaction. Make sure the buyer passes a background check if your state requires it, or at least verify they're not a prohibited person. And get a bill of sale signed by both parties. Step 3, avoid the red flag factors. Don't sell guns quickly after buying them. Don't sell them in the original packaging. Don't advertise them publicly if you can avoid it. Sell to people you know personally, and use cash, not payment apps. Step 4, if you've sold multiple guns in the past year or two, stop now. The more sales you have, the easier it is for the ATF to argue you're dealing. Even if each sale was legitimate, the pattern matters. And step 5, if the ATF contacts you, do not talk to them without a lawyer. I don't care how friendly they seem. I don't care if they say they just have a few questions. You say, I'm invoking my right to remain silent and I want a lawyer. Then you shut up. Anything you say will be used against you. Now let's talk about the constitutional challenges, because this rule is being fought in court right now. Gun rights groups have filed lawsuits arguing that the ATF exceeded its authority. The argument is that Congress defined engaged in the business in the statute, and the ATF can't just rewrite that definition. The law says livelihood and profit. The ATF's rule says profit alone is enough. That's a change to the law, which the ATF doesn't have the power to do. Only Congress can change the law. But here's the problem. Until a court strikes down this rule, it's in effect. The ATF is enforcing it. People are being investigated and charged. If you get caught up in a case and you argue the rule is unconstitutional, you're still going to spend tens of thousands of dollars on a lawyer and years of your life fighting it. And if you lose, you're going to federal prison. So you can't just ignore the rule and hope it gets struck down. You have to protect yourself. Now, here's another issue that's making this rule a nightmare. The ATF is using undercover operations to catch people. They set up fake buyer accounts online. They contact people who post guns for sale. They ask questions designed to get you to incriminate yourself. They might say, hey, do you sell guns often? Or are you looking to make a profit on this? And if you answer the wrong way, they use that as evidence. There have been cases where ATF agents posed as buyers, purchased a gun from someone, and then arrested that person for dealing without a license. And here's the kicker. The ATF doesn't have to tell you they're investigating you. They can watch you for months. They can gather evidence. They can build a case. And then one day, they show up with a warrant. By that point, it's too late. You're already charged. Now let me address the argument that people on the pro-gun control side are making. They say this rule is necessary to close the gun show loophole and stop unlicensed dealers from operating. They argue that too many people are buying guns in bulk and reselling them without background checks, and this rule cracks down on that. Here's my response. If someone is actually running a gun business, selling dozens or hundreds of guns a year, they should have a license. I agree with that. But this rule doesn't just target large-scale dealers. It targets anyone who makes any profit on any sale. That's not closing a loophole. That's creating a trap for ordinary gun owners. And the idea that you need a license to sell a single gun from your personal collection is absurd. That's not dealing. That's just selling your property. But the ATF doesn't see it that way anymore. Hey, 73% of people watching right now aren't subscribed. Don't be part of that group. Join the 50,000 gun owners who get these critical legal updates first. Click that subscribe button right now because the laws I am covering next week could affect whether you can legally buy or sell guns in your state after March. Don't miss it. Now let us talk about what this means for gun shows and online sales, because that's where most private sales happen. Gun shows used to be a place where collectors could buy, sell, and trade freely. But under the new rule, the ATF is scrutinizing gun show sales heavily. If you're at a gun show and you're selling multiple guns, even from your personal collection, the ATF might decide you're dealing. They've been sending agents to gun shows undercover. They watch who's selling, they track how many guns you sell, and if you sell too many, they investigate. And online sales are even riskier. Websites like Arms List and Gunbroker are being monitored by the ATF. If you post a gun for sale and the ATF thinks you're selling too often or making too much profit, they'll open a case. Some people have been charged just for posting multiple guns over a few months. The ATF argued that posting online shows intent to deal because you're advertising like a business. It doesn't matter that you're just selling from your personal collection. The optics look bad, and that's all the ATF needs. Here's my advice. If you're going to sell a gun, do it face-to-face with someone you know. Don't post it online. Don't sell it at a gun show. Sell it to a friend or family member. Document the sale. Make it clear it's a one-time thing from your personal collection. And don't do it often. The more sales you have, the more risk you take. This information could literally save you from 5 years in federal prison. Subscribe now because my next video explains exactly what to do if the ATF contacts you about past gun sales. I'll give you the legal script to use, word for word. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss it. Now let's talk about the penalties again, because I need you to understand how serious this is. Dealing in firearms without a license is a violation of 18 U.S.C. Section 922A, for 1A. It's a federal felony. The maximum penalty is 5 years in federal prison and a fine of up to $250,000. And here's the thing about federal sentencing. If you're convicted, you're probably going to prison. Federal judges have limited discretion because of sentencing guidelines, and gun crimes are taken very seriously. You're not getting probation, you're not getting a slap on the wrist, you're doing time. And once you're a convicted felon, you lose your gun rights forever. You can't own a gun, you can't possess a gun, you can't even be in a house where there's a gun. Your Second Amendment rights are gone for life. On top of that, you lose your right to vote in many states. You'll have trouble finding a job because of the felony record. You can't get certain professional licenses. Your life is destroyed, all because you sold a gun to a friend and the ATF decided you had the wrong intent. Now let me give you another hypothetical to show how this rule can trap innocent people. Imagine a woman named Sarah. Sarah inherited 5 guns from her grandfather. She's not a gun person. She doesn't want them, so she decides to sell them. She posts them online. She sells all 5 over the course of 2 months. She prices them fairly and makes a small profit on each one because she wants to get what they're worth. The ATF sees the posts. They see she sold 5 guns in 2 months. They see she made a profit. They investigate. They charge her with dealing without a license. Sarah had no idea she was breaking the law. She thought she was just selling her inheritance. But under the new rule, the ATF says she was engaged in the business because she sold multiple guns with the intent to profit. Now here's what Sarah should have done. She should have taken the guns to a licensed dealer and consigned them or sold them outright to the dealer. Yes, she would have gotten less money, but she wouldn't be facing federal charges. That's the trade-off now. You can sell privately and risk prison, or you can go through a dealer and accept less money. Most people are going to choose the dealer option because the risk is too high. And that's exactly what the ATF wants. They want to make private sales so risky that people stop doing them. Then all gun sales go through licensed dealers, which means background checks on every transaction. That's the end goal. It's not about safety, it's about control. Now let me address one more myth. Some people think if they sell a gun at a loss, they're safe. They say, I bought this gun for $600 and I'm selling it for $500, so I'm not making a profit. The ATF can't charge me. Wrong. The rule says predominantly earn a profit. That means they look at your overall pattern. If you sell 10 guns and you lose money on 2 but make money on the other 8, they can still charge you. The loss on 2 guns doesn't protect you. They look at the totality. And here's another thing. Even if you're selling at a loss on every gun, if the ATF thinks you bought guns with the intent to resell them, they can still charge you. Intent is the key. If they can show you bought guns not for personal use, but to flip them, even at a loss, that's dealing. So selling at a loss is not a shield. Here's what you need to understand. This rule is designed to be vague. It's designed to give the ATF maximum flexibility to charge whoever they want. They can pick and choose their targets. And once they decide to come after you, it's very hard to defend yourself because intent is so subjective. The best defense is not to sell guns privately at all. Or if you must, do it so rarely and so carefully that the ATF has no basis to argue you're dealing. Look, I spend hours every week researching federal firearms law, reading ATF rules, and talking to lawyers so you have this information when you need it most. The least you can do is hit that subscribe button to support this channel and make sure you never miss an update that could keep you out of federal prison. Subscribe right now. And if you found this helpful, share it with every gun owner you know, because I guarantee most of them have no idea that selling a gun to a friend can now be a federal felony. Remember, this is educational information based on ATF regulations and federal law. It is not legal advice for your specific situation. Always consult with a qualified federal criminal defense attorney before making decisions about firearm sales. Stay safe out there. Know your rights. And for God's sake, be extremely careful about selling guns privately. The ATF is watching, and they're looking for people to make examples of. Don't be that person.